Rather than listen to reason, Speaker McCarthy has caved to extremists. By passing the Default on America Act, he's handed the keys over to the House Freedom Caucus. As one House Freedom Caucus member said plainly, Speaker McCarthy cannot get to 218 with changes to this deal.
Without a deal on the debt ceiling, we are facing the possibility of default as early as June 1st. Speaker McCarthy has accepted President Biden's invitation to a meeting next week, but administration officials say the president's stance has not changed and he will not negotiate spending cuts over the debt ceiling. So let's discuss with a couple of our favorite political contributors. Jason Johnson, a politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University, and Matthew Dowd, a former George W. Bush strategist and founder of Country Over Party. Mr. Dowd, earlier today, I interviewed the CEO of Wells Fargo, a former Treasury Secretary, a former head of the Congressional Budget Office, and the head of McKinsey, all who said, if we default, it will be so economically disastrous, we don't even know how far it will reach. I totally understand why the White House does not want to negotiate with Republicans here. It's not even a fair negotiation. But do you think, if that happens, the White House runs the risk that they could get blamed by at least some of the American people that don't know the details of how this works?
Well, as you mentioned it, I have a Wells Fargo credit card, so I was thinking maybe I can just call them up and say, I won't pay my bill until you cut your staff in New York by 10%. Can I do that with Wells Fargo? I'm hoping that if that's the path I can take, I will.
You've made the perfect analogy. But there's millions of people out there who might not know that. So what do you do politically if you're the White House with that?
I think what you do politically with the White House is actually what they're doing, which is don't give in to demands of a child who's unwilling to be responsible for their own actions and the actions of what they did in the last few years. And I think at this point, yes, I think it's do we want the government to default, and do we want our economy to suffer? No. But what we're running up against is the fact that we do not have a responsible governing party in the House of Representatives. They are not responsible in any way, shape, or form, and this debt ceiling is part of it. So if I were Joe Biden, I hope they can work it out, and I hope 5 or 6 Republicans, come to reality and honor the debt and honor what the bills that have already been incurred. But if I were Biden, I'd push this as far as he possibly can and make them at least act like they're responsible.
Well, Jason, Democrats have this plan to potentially force a vote on a clean debt ceiling bill. Any chance you think that's going to happen?
No, it's not going to happen. But I have been watching this too long. Stephanie, we've all been watching this too long to get sincerely worried. The same thing happens. Republicans or Democrats say, hey, the debt ceiling is coming. We're all worried about it. The administration says, hey, I won't bow down to terrorists. And everybody complains and everybody gets worried. And then the business industry gets worried. And then the stock market gets worried. And then they come up with a deal. That's what happens. In fact, the lack of leverage that the Republicans have now is because we always see how this plays out. It is a month away. The Biden administration has every right politically and strategically to say, we're not going to work with you because we know we're going to cut a deal at the last minute. And I'll be honest with you, Stephanie, it doesn't matter if it's the debt ceiling or just the natural ebbs and flows of the economy. If the economy is bad in 2024, it ends up being bad for the sitting party. This won't be the catalyst. There's 20 other reasons why the economy could be in the toilet next year. But Biden is politically making a strong decision because you can't make calculations for 2024 on decisions that we've seen over the last 10 years tend to get made in the last week anyway.
Yes, but we've seen these standoffs before. And I have to tell you, earlier today, Steve Mnuchin, the former Treasury Secretary, in some way echoed part of what Jason was saying. Like, we have these standoffs before. They happen every few years. But, Matthew, do you think this time is different? In previous years, we didn't have the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene having the kind of power that she does with such a little understanding of how the economy actually works.
Well, yeah, yes, we're in a different time because we have insane people in charge of the House of Representatives. Whether they go with what Jason thinks, which I kind of agree with, that in the end, in the last 12 hours, something will get done because it has to get done, and it usually gets done. But we've never been faced with the idea that we have a governing party of the House of Representatives who's insane. And so, yes, we can predict, we can base make predictions based on the past, but we've never had what we have today in the House of Representatives.
All right. Well, Matt, Republicans are also claiming that they are not going after veterans' benefits in their bill. But for fact's sake, the president pointed it out in a tweet today. There is nothing in their bill that protects veterans from cuts. So are Republicans going to get away with this? Does the veteran community have any idea what's in there?
I mean, I firmly believe the veteran community knows what's in there. And I think that it's up to Democrats and up to people running in 2024 to make sure people know about this on Election Day in the course of this. And listen, if I were any Democrat running, every time a Republican said that's not true, I would say, do you think Joe Biden won the election in 2020? Okay, we can't believe anything you say. Because more than half of the people in the House of Representatives who deny that they're cutting veterans benefits still believe Joe Biden didn't win the election in 2020. So their credibility is shot anyway, but it's up to Democrats to make the argument in 2024.
I want to actually share what former head of the Congressional Budget Office, Peter Orszag, said in an interview that I did with him earlier today about another lane that could be taken here. Watch this.
The first best clearly is to cut a deal, and that should happen. But we're getting close enough here that we have to start playing through the alternatives. I think relative to default or prioritization, if we're in that position, I would invoke the 14th Amendment and just ignore the debt limit.
Okay, so the 14th Amendment basically says ignore the debt limit and Democrats, the government, can keep on trucking. You think that's a possibility here, Jason?
Oh, anything is possible. But Stephanie, this is part of the Kabuki Theater that everybody does right now. Everybody suddenly becomes a constitutional scholar. Suddenly everybody's got an economics degree, economics PhD from Harvard. Everyone's going to toss out plans, but no one is really invested in these alternative plans. They're just saying them now because it's part of the negotiation. They're going to end up cutting a deal. We can play this back in June 1st when they cut a deal, Stephanie, because they're going to end up cutting one. It is too dangerous politically and economically for the Democrats and for what remains of semi-competent people in the Republican Party to let the country go into default. They all know that it's potentially dangerous. Yes, Marjorie Taylor Greene is an incompetent person. Yes, Matt Gaetz is terrible. Yes, Jim Jordan is terrible. Yes, you have lots of Republicans who want to cover for terrorists, don't believe the joke. We know all those things about the Republican Party, but we also know one thing that drives them all, and that's money. And their chambers of Congress, their chambers of commerce and local business people and national business people that fill their coffers are going to tell them to get it done. That's why something eventually gets done. So the constitutional, legislative polling tricks that everybody's going to be talking about, it's all part of the Performance Act for something that we all know is eventually going to get handled.
Never pragmatic, rarely practical. That's what we call politics. Jason Johnson, Matthew Dowd, great to see both of you.